So I decided to make a video about the 5 aggressive close range SMGs, just so you would know which to use and in what situations, and which are best of course. Updated Mac-10 gunsmith simply because I concluded that I absolutely need to have better recoil, hence with different underbarrel. Fennec gunsmith is just with staple, SX9 and CX9 are also just with default ones, and VMP, this is just what I personally like the most to use. Mac-10 is here simply because when I made my review of 100 rank matches, I saw that 2 of them ended up in the second best performance, and so I decided to try it out as well. And like I said, I concluded that I do need to have good recoil, and overall it is basically kind of a more aggressive variant of the Fennec. You have more bullets, very fast fire rate, but the recoil even with the attachments is not as good, and also the range is like worse compared to the Fennec, like almost like half of the Fennec's range, I would say. And so this is a good variant to use if you want to use a gun that does not have an optimal recoil and range. But like the big mag size is a huge plus, because you will not run out of mag when spraying bullets at your enemies. And the range, even though it is not as good, it is still like kind of good for as long as you use it as you should use an aggressive SMG. And the thing why the gun is not like widely used is simply because the other options that we will go further are just better. Next is the Fennec. So the funny thing is that if you watched any old videos, players would say how Fennec is actually very difficult to control. Even the gunsmith with the operator foregrip that I'm using and pretty much everyone else is using, but in contrast with the Mac-10, it is actually way smoother, like the recoil is not as difficult, and overall ADS tracking is better. The fire rate is also very fast, but you only have 40 bullets, and so you do run out of mag super fast. And basically the ease of control, it is kind of, well, leveraged by the fact that you will have to reload a lot, and you have to put a bit more brain into when you're shooting the bullets into your enemies. And with Mac-10, as long as you can control the recoil, you can kind of just spray and pray. And so Fennec, it is a more competitive choice because, well, ease of control is a relevant factor, but at the same time it requires more skill. And I would say that if you are an absolute beginner and want to have an aggressive SMG, you could actually try the Mac-10, or well, just the very best SMG that we will go through next. Well, around the end, not like right next. Now, Switchblade X9, it has received a few buffs to the mobility, and I think that the mobility, like the strafing, overall movement is actually the smoothest. But the thing is that the fire rate Fennec still beats it, and the extra mobility, well, I play with 3 fingers on a phone, so I don't really care about like extra mobility shenanigans, because I don't do all that fancy movement stuff. And so for me, I think that I don't really care about the extra mobility boost, and at the same time, so the Fennec just kind of, well, at least it feels that it can kill enemies faster, more efficiently. And this mobility, well, if you play with more fingers or like on an iPad or whatever, and you're like a very heavy on mobility person, then you might actually favor the Switchblade X9 so far. But well, for me, and I assume that for many players who are just playing on phone, with like 2, 3, maybe 4 fingers, it is just not that relevant of an advantage compared to other options. CX9 on the other hand is not as good in terms of mobility as the SX9 and does not kill enemies as quickly as the Fennec or Mag 10. But if you're using the Big Mag variant, you have 50 bullets, the recoil is also very easy. The range is also pretty good for an aggressive SMG. And you can also use the burst variant if you want for like quick kills, but then you should use the vulture perk to get your ammo back. And this variant with the 50 rounds mag, like I think it would be better in respawns. And so the advantages would be that it is very easy to control, has a huge mag. And the disadvantages would be that the previous SMGs they are just faster in time to kill. But like again, they are not as easy to control. So if you are like grinding Couteu for many hours, you might consider using CX9 for your aggressive SMG slot, just because of the ease of use. But at the same time, the next weapon is just better. And finally the VMP, the aggressive SMG MVP. Basically it has a very fast fire rate, especially if you use the rapid fire pack. It has good recoil if you're using my gunsmith, and a pretty decent recoil nonetheless if you're using like the big YouTuber recommendations without the grip tape, which I'm using, that improves it even more. And so also the big mag. Like I'm using 48 bullets, you can also add a bigger mag with a slower ADS time. But well, the thing is that you have many mag options, and even the one I'm using is 48, so it is more than the Fennec, and more than the CX9, almost the same as CX9, and just a bit fewer compared to Mag 10. And just the overall mobility, the good time to kill, and also the range for an aggressive SMG. Like, of course, USS9 it has better range, and if you're using them both you will feel the difference. But for aggressive SMG you don't really need the very much of the extra range. And so VMP is just hands down the best from these aggressive SMGs. And it kind of removes the other options from the meta, honestly. Like, you can use the previously shown ones, but if you use VMP you will just be doing better in pretty much any of the situations where you would use the other options. So like the other SMGs that I covered, they are pretty good, like when you are just reviewing, when I review them they are good, but they just cannot compare with the VMP. And that is a actually interesting thing Couteu has done, that we pretty much removed other options, because before VMP we had Fennec, SX9, CX9, like they all were valid and slightly different, like I covered the differences earlier, but none of them can just compete with VMP. And so I think that in this video I kind of reviewed the differences and also showed the just the very best. And frankly, if you don't want to use VMP, well, you can choose one of the earlier ones that I mentioned, like based on what would work best for your playstyle. But just know that whatever you're doing, if you choose VMP, will be just doing it better.